Good evening, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Thousands of Serbians gathered in Novi Sad to commemorate the victims of the canopy collapse 1 year after the tragedy, demanding snap elections. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Ukraine deploys special forces to Pokrovsk as Russians enter the city. Queen Elizabeth's second son, Andrew, is prince no more. And millions of Poles visit cemeteries on All Saints' Day. Tens of thousands of peaceful protesters gathered in Serbia's Novi Sad on the first anniversary of the canopy collapse, which killed 16 people and led to mass anti-government demonstrations across the country. Our Balkans correspondent, Paweł Trzaskowski, travelled to Novi Sad and has this next report.
Behind me you can see a railway station in Novi Sad, still closed after its concrete canopy collapsed, tragically killing 16 people. And today, on the first anniversary of these events, massive crowds have gathered in Novi Sad to commemorate the victims of this incident. This collapse sparked nationwide protests, with people taking to the streets opposing what they perceive as state capture and corruption of the ruling SNS party and the country's president, Alexander Vučić. These protests took a violent turn for the last couple of months. However, today they were very peaceful. It could be predicted because yesterday the country's president issued a state address in which he apologized to the protesters and asked for national unity today.
Let tomorrow be a day that unites us, not a day that further tears us apart. The day when we will unite in the grief of families and show our respect and love for them. Not a day that any of us will use for our own political benefit.
However, this outreach was contradicted by the fact that one of the opposition legal councillors was arrested the day before today's protests. And this is why those who attended the Novi Sad protests today vowed to continue fighting for a change.
I hope that everything is not in vain, that we can make change by being here, doing something, that we can make change.
A year has passed. It's a lot of talk. So now we need something, like elections.
We have to do something about it. It's the end. It's the end of the old Serbia. It's beginning of the new one.
One of the protesters' demands is calling for snap elections. So far, the SNS party and Alexander Vučić have not bowed down to this demand. However, the opposition on the streets is only growing. From Novi Sad, Serbia, for TVP World, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
We continue to destroy the occupier, says Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, as Kyiv deploys special forces to Pokrovsk, a strategically important city in the country's east, to stall the progress of Russian troops. Randy Potts reports on the latest from Ukraine and Russia's hybrid operations in the west.
For over a year, the Russian military has been slowly inching toward the southeastern Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, and now seems close to taking this strategic road and rail hub near Donetsk. Russia said on Friday its forces struck Ukrainian defense industry sites and other military targets, while Ukraine reported repelling multiple attacks. To help defend the city, Ukraine landed special forces in embattled parts of Pokrovsk earlier this week. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is holding on to hope.
There were many detailed military reports today on the frontline situation. First of all, Pokrovsk, of course. We continue to destroy the occupier, and the most important thing is to stop Russian assaults wherever and whenever possible.
Russia's defense ministry also said its forces took control of the villages of Krasnohirska in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region and Sadova in Kharkiv region. Videos released by the ministry on Saturday appear to show drones targeting Ukrainian military vehicles and bunkers, and the Russian flag being waved throughout the village.
What we're learning as observers of this fighting is that it is very difficult to hold terrain, especially built-up areas with just drones. You need manpower and lots of artillery and rocket capability to defend over these long fronts. Of course, the drones have played an important role, but I think in the defense, you still need manpower. And so this is where some of Ukraine's manpower shortages are coming into play.
Meanwhile, in Russia, the western city of Oryol is restricting supply of heat and hot water after Ukrainian drones hit a pipeline at a local power plant on Friday. And on the legal front, Russia is also counting losses, as this week, for the first time ever, a Russian citizen is prosecuted in Lithuania for war crimes.
Police investigators have extradited a Russian citizen to Lithuania for war crimes for the first time. This step sets an important precedent and proves Ukraine's readiness for active international cooperation in combating war crimes. It's also confirmation of the inevitability of punishment for every war criminal.
At the international level, you have the ICC, and at the international level, there may be this new possible tribunal concerning aggression, focusing on political leaders, but that's not yet established.
As the Russian army makes small advances in Ukraine, its hybrid war in Europe continues, with Russian incursions recorded this week by 3 NATO member countries.
At 8:49 a.m., once again, as it happened already yesterday and today, our MiG-29s intercepted a Russian reconnaissance aircraft. The U-20 did not violate Polish airspace, and its flight was monitored by the patrol crew of our MiG-29 aircrafts. Romania and Moldova also recorded similar incidents. There, too, all NATO defense systems were engaged. This shows how difficult today's reality is.
This was the third time in the past week that Polish fighter jets have intercepted a Russian warplane flying over international waters in the Baltic Sea. For TVP World, Randy Potts.
Hungary will not be exempt from sanctions against Russia's 2 biggest oil companies, US President Donald Trump has announced. Despite the American leader's statement, the Hungarian Prime Minister believes he can still change Trump's mind during his trip to Washington next week. Diana Skaya has this report.
They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The 2 biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil.
That's U.S. President Donald Trump imposing his first Ukraine-related sanctions since returning to the Oval Office, hitting Russian oil giants Lukoil and Rosneft. But one of his closest allies in Europe isn't happy.
If we have to pay more, even double, for oil and gas, then we cannot pass that burden on to people at the current reduced utility prices. So, those who want a reduction in utility costs, we must protect Hungary's right to buy oil and gas from the Russians, or at the same price as the Russian price, or cheaper.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán says his country can't survive without Russian energy. Blaming geographical factors, Orbán warns U.S. sanctions could crash his country's economy. Hungary imports more than 4/5 of its crude from Russia, and Orbán's betting on Trump granting him a waiver when they meet at the White House on November 7, even though Trump already said no.
I have to explain to the Americans that they can't imagine what it's like if a country is landlocked. When the American president looks at the map of his country, he sees that waters wash its shores from the left to the right. On the other hand, Hungary is a landlocked country. We have no sea access. Direct sea transport is not possible.
But former Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Balázs tells TVP World that Orbán's no alternatives story doesn't add up.
Orbán has tried several times to ask a waiver from the United States. A few weeks ago, he tried to explain to President Trump that Hungary was a landlocked country and we have no other possibility than to rely on the old Druzhba pipeline from Russia, which is not true. Donald Trump believed that argument. However, experts pointed to the fact that Hungary connection to the Adriatic Sea across Croatia, which could replace without any problem the Russian sources.
While most EU member states reduced imports of Russian fossil fuels following Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Hungary kept the oil flowing, standing out as Putin's best friend in the EU. Meanwhile, Trump already scrapped his planned meeting with Putin in Budapest after Moscow opposed an immediate ceasefire.
I'm going to have to know that we're going to make a deal. I'm not going to be wasting my time. I've always had a great relationship with Vladimir Putin, but this has been very disappointing.
And now, Orbán heads to Washington with a full entourage, hoping to charm his way out of Trump's sanctions. And only one question remains. Can Hungary's defiance on Russian oil survive U.S. pressure? For TVP World, I'm Diana Skaya.
Although created in 2022, the world first learned about the Russian Volunteer Corps during the famous raid of Belgorod region more than a year ago. Who are the Russians fighting for Ukraine's freedom, and what are the motivations and what are the organization's strategic goals? We visited the unit in Ukraine to tell you their story.
The Russian Volunteer Corps is a military political organization of Russian volunteers, mainly citizens of the Russian Federation, who have come to Ukraine's defense. In addition to restoring the territorial integrity of the invaded state within its 1991 borders, the main goal of the Corps is to overthrow the current dictatorship in the Kremlin. Let's get to know them better.
The Russian Volunteer Corps is a special unit subordinate to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and we are assigned a wide variety of tasks. These are often missions typical of special forces. We use a wide range of military equipment at our disposal, including armoured vehicles, tanks, boats and aircraft. The spectrum of our activities is very broad.
The combat trail covers operations in the Chernihiv, Kyiv, Kherson, Zaporizhia and Donetsk regions, as well as in the Bryansk and Belgorod regions outside Ukraine. The Corps won one of the most important battles of this war, the Battle of the Volchansk aggregate plant, a victory paid for with the lives of brothers. However, armed combat is not the only form of resistance chosen by the Corps.
One of the main strategic tasks of the Russian Volunteer Corps is not only to fight against Putin's regime, but also to create and build a new community, a new Russian society and a new civil, political, military and cultural life. Our task is to awaken contemporary society, unite, reconcile and build a politically civilized community of Russians.
During my time in the Corps, I met many young soldiers, all of whom had a visible brotherly bond and a high level of motivation.
The greatest glory for us is to unite our brothers into one collective with one common goal, brotherhood. You know, I always say that the word unity does not include the concept of me. Those who understand this know what brotherhood means in the Russian Volunteer Corps. We have countless examples of people risking their lives for one another, of brothers giving their lives for their brothers. These examples prove that for us, the concept of brotherhood is not just a word.
The Russian Volunteer Corps is a clear thorn in the side of Kremlin propaganda.
We only tell the truth. To combat Russian propaganda, all you need to do is tell the truth. We always talk about both successes on the front line and problems, as well as political and social activities. We always keep our word. We fulfill our promises. We do not embellish reality. And this greatly irritates the propagandists of the Russian Federation.
The Russian Volunteer Corps has grown from a small group of volunteers into one of the largest formations fighting on the Ukrainian side, coordinating combat missions that will be remembered as some of the most important chapters in the history of this war. The group is constantly growing and raising awareness about the Kremlin regime, which its members have decided to devote their lives to fighting.
From Andrew, Prince and Duke of York, to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the Buckingham Palace has stripped the second son of late Queen Elizabeth II of his titles following weeks of pressure to act over Andrew's relationship with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now it turns out at least some of Andrew's lascivious parties were funded by taxpayers' money. Maciej Jastrzębski has this report.
After losing the Prince and Duke of York, there are no more significant titles to strip from Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The former prince was also deprived of his royal lodge residence, which he is due to vacate.
It was seismic. I don't think any of us very seasoned royal correspondents who lived through the Diana years and the turmoil of that decade ever thought it would get to this extent, that the king would go so far as to strip his brother of his birthright, of the fact that he was born a prince.
Prince Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, will also have to leave the royal lodge and will cease using the title Duchess of York. However, the couple's children, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, are to retain their titles, a modest victory for Andrew. Andrew's divestment follows the publication of Virginia Giuffre's trauma memoir. In the book, she accused Andrew of sexually abusing her when she was 17 on 3 occasions. The abuse was facilitated and took place in the framework of an adolescent trafficking ring run by the financial mogul and pedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
I think it's about time. The whole thing of it is about honour, so it's about time he got removed from it.
This is absolutely monumental in the history of the monarchy. It really is.
Giuffre died by suicide at the age of 41, reportedly as a result of the mental trauma caused by the abuse. But her family says that with Andrew's downfall, she has gotten her vengeance.
She'd be so proud. He's just Andrew. He's no longer a prince. And she is celebrating from the heavens right now, saying, I did it. This normal girl from a normal family has taken down a prince.
Still, Virginia's brother says the investigation is ongoing and the family wants justice. Prince Andrew, however, denies any wrongdoing. Nevertheless, the months leading up to his divestment produced allegations that tapping into Epstein's adolescent trafficking underworld was not the only instance of Andrew's sexual misconduct. As royal biographer Andrew Loney wrote in his new book entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, the then prince allegedly orchestrated a 4-day extravaganza involving 40 prostitutes at a 5-star Bangkok hotel, and on top of that, paid for it using British taxpayer money. According to Loney, the incident took place in 2001 when Andrew was 41 and on a diplomatic mission as the UK's trade envoy.
Today, cemeteries across Poland are flooded with candle lights as millions of Poles travel across the country to pay respects to their ancestors and deceased loved ones. Sonia Gatabiszczan reports on All Saints' Day, one of the most important traditions in the Polish Catholic calendar.
November 1st marks All Saints' Day. In Catholic tradition, it is said to honor all those who have passed on to the kingdom of heaven.
The lives of the saints teach us that it is possible to live to the full amid the complexity of the present, without neglecting the apostolic mandate to shine like the stars in the world.
The tradition has a long history, with evidence suggesting saints were already venerated by the end of the 2nd century. But the practice has also evolved over time.
Very early, there was a consciousness that the number of those who are saved, we are calling them saints, is much larger than just those whom we are able to name.
In Poland, the day is closely associated with remembering loved ones and visiting their graves.
We come every year, not just to our parents' graves, but we're also visiting acquaintances, friends. This is the one holiday when everybody should do exactly what we are doing.
And on this day, even graves without caretakers have not been forgotten about, with volunteers collecting donations to preserve them.
Some people donate more, some less, whoever can and whoever wishes to. But it's nice that people are sensitive to the cause of saving historic tombstones.
All Saints' Day is also observed in other European countries.
Remembering our loved ones, it's a bit difficult, but at the same time, you're glad to have a place to come to.
And while older generations appreciate having a place to go and honor their loved ones, some of them note that young people seem to be in the minority of those visiting cemeteries.
It could be that traditions are being lost and are fading away.
It is very natural that especially very old people sometimes says, all my colleagues of my class have passed away. I am just alone. It is why especially the older people feel their duty to be there. Younger people will one day also be a bit older and will have also this experience. Their peers are somewhere in this cemetery, another one.
In Poland, paying respects to late loved ones is part of a larger practice that continues through All Souls Day on November 2nd. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
Tens of thousands of Serbians gathered in the country's second largest city, Novi Sad, to commemorate the victims of canopy collapse, which killed 16 people exactly 1 year ago. The tragedy prompted mass student-led protests against corruption, with demonstrators demanding snap elections. And to talk about the first anniversary of Novi Sad catastrophe, we're joined by Ivana Stradna, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Good evening.
Good evening. Always good to be a guest at your show.
Likewise. So it seems that the hell has in fact frozen over. President Alexander Vučić has apologized protesters for using harsh language against them. What is Alexander Vučić trying to achieve by doing that?
So Alexander Vučić is truly in a big trouble because he hoped that protests would end soon after 2024, November the 1st, and students are still massively protesting. Now he's, even trying to appease the part of the student body and the rest of the Serbian population, trying to find a mutual language so he can save himself, because he sees that students are not going to stop protesting anytime soon. As a matter of fact, today, they are marking 1 year anniversary when a canopy collapsed and killed 16 people. And those young people have decided to fight for their values and not to stop. As a matter of fact, today they announced that protests are going to continue. And when you compare this with a few more things that are happening right now in Serbia, with economy that is absolutely going downhill, with the latest U.S. sanctions on a Russian Gazprom, that a subsidiary NIS in Serbia, that is going to impact massively economy and energy sector. And also the latest harsh criticism coming from the EU, Vučić knows that he's in a big trouble in the coming months.
So the protests will continue. Today's commemorations were very calm, with 16-minute silence for the victims of the catastrophe. Now, do you think that violence, which unfortunately took place some months ago, well, clashes with police, are they gone for good?
I don't think that they're gone for good, because Vučić is now playing a very, very careful game. There were numerous accusations of Serbia even using like a sound weapon. He already completely destroyed free media, and there were massive attacks on young people during protests. So right now he's playing a game trying to buy more time. But make no mistake, Serbia is becoming more and more authoritarian, like Belarus 2.0. And Vučić is just waiting for his moment when the EU might actually turn a blind eye to his actions to go after students. So now he's playing a very balancing game, but if he used violence against students in the past, he might do it again.
Right. The protests are, well, they are anti-government, but I'm wondering which political forces in Serbia are trying to exploit the students' movement, because there seems to be very little pro-European slogans, but quite a lot of nationalistic rhetoric during the protests.
So unlike in Georgia, where you have a very clear pro-EU protests against the government, in Serbia, students and the rest of the population are protesting against corruption and the Serbian corruption and the Serbian regime. Unfortunately, in Serbia, for many years, you've had a horrible nationalistic propaganda that unfortunately stirred very, very far-right narratives, something that you see still can see during the protests. Of course, there are also people who are pro-EU during the protests. There are people who share different values, but the protests are not about foreign policy. The protests are specifically for complaining about the Serbian regime. And I'm not surprised, I have to tell you, because as someone who has been following the Serbian politics for a very long time, the nationalistic narratives that are coming directly from the government absolutely makes sense. Because just like Putin, as soon as he came to power, he made sure to completely destroy pro-Western opposition and to strengthen the far right so he can position himself in the middle. That's exactly what Serbian president did. He completely destroyed pro-Western opposition, strengthen the far-right groups, and then position himself in the center, telling the West, especially the EU, I might not be perfect, but the opposition is even worse. And it's exactly what the game that he's playing right now. But I'm truly hoping, eventually with the elections in Serbian that there might be, some changes. But it's the question of the EU and how and what they are going to do about Belgrade and its government.
Protesters demand the people responsible for the canopy collapse, or at least the people they view as responsible, to face justice. Question here is whether Alexander Vučić is willing to sacrifice some of his own people to stabilize the internal situation. The Prime Minister has already changed, right? But what about people facing charges?
So I don't think in the long run that, even though Vučić is a very pragmatic leader, I don't believe, in the long run that he's willing to sacrifice all those people who are truly responsible for this, because he believes that he can control all those narratives. And that's precisely what people are seeing through his games. And that's why students are not willing to give up. They are not falling for his halfway concessions that he is trying to make. Because, as I mentioned, those protests, yes, they're also about the collapse of canopy, but it's also the much bigger question, the question of democracy, because Serbia is not a democratic country, basically, anymore, with horrendous media landscape that is undermined, where human rights are declining. And all those young people, they don't want to leave the country. They want to stay there. But what kind of future they are going to have there with this government?
Having said that, in 2 years, Alexander Vučić will end his second and thus final presidential term, and snap elections seem rather unlikely. So who may climb to power in Serbia in 2027?
Right now, it's too early, to say who will be in power and who is willing, to take over. And that's precisely, this is not only a test for Vučić, this is a big test also for the Serbian society to put its act together. And if they truly want a better democratic values, those values might be, supported from the EU, but they have to come directly from the Serbian population. And hopefully, someone who shares those values will be in power. But as I have to also emphasize one important thing, Vučić has been in power for a long time, and he actually strengthened very, very close ties with both Russia and China. So even if someone wants to be closer to the EU, that person will have to take very, very costly steps that might actually hurt both Russia and China. And that is going to be a question that whether that person is going to be willing to do that. I just hope one thing, which is that after the Milosevic regime, the government that came to power, yes, officially they were pro-democracy, et cetera, and they had an incredible chance to bring Serbia closer to the West, and they failed. So I truly hope whoever comes after Vučić, they will not repeat the same mistake and be another person who will just benefit from the status quo.
For Serbia and for the region's sake, Ivana Stradna, research fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching and stay with us for more news and interviews here on TVP World.